I think it's beneficial for everybody, every applicant to think, okay, if I apply this year and for whatever reason I don't get in, then what am I going to do this next year? Well, welcome to another episode of Am I Ready? The broadcast where we examine a student and all there is to know about them, and then I come to a conclusion about whether I think that they're ready to apply for medical school. We're looking at applicants who are considering applying this year in the 22-23 cycle, and so we have a guest today that I'd like to introduce to everyone. Hello, Spencer. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Now tell us where you're calling from.
Yeah, I'm calling from Price, Utah. It's about 2 hours south of Salt Lake, just a little small town. So
Okay, good. So you're in small town America, and now did you grow? Are you from Utah originally?
yeah, so I grew up in Salt Lake.
Uh-huh.
So it was close to home and good place to go, but I could still be far enough away from home that I didn't have to live at home. So
right, there you go. Absolutely. Well, good. Well, Spencer, we're going to look at everything there is to know about you, or at least what we know from Mapped, and then we're going to talk about you and stuff. And so the first thing that we typically look at when we talk about students from their Mapped account is their GPA graph, mostly because that's the first thing that comes up on Maps when you open up the dashboard, and there it is. This graphs out your entire academic history, and so what we see here is a graph that indicates a cumulative GPA of 3.17 and a science GPA of 3.07, and so and what I'm looking at here, Spencer, is is kind of some ups and downs here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at?
yeah, so I guess the first main one, so fall 17 to 18 in spring. That was actually, I had rotator cuff surgery, chasing baseball, college baseball. And so I thought I could have it at the end of fall semester and be fine in spring semester, but it was too much. Like, it was my dominant hand. I couldn't take notes. I still had like some pain meds that I had to take in order to function. So those 2 semesters, I pretty much I peeled through the universities. And so those are pretty much 2 semesters of straight W's.
Okay. And you said that's the fall and spring 17-18, right?
Yeah. So I guess I think I had 1 class or 2 classes that I pulled off a C in.
Mm-hmm.
So little did I know it would have been better if I just did try, but
right. Now, what was your major in college?
So originally it was psychology, and then around like spring, when it starts to go up in like spring, right when COVID started, they offered biology at my extension university, so I switched to that because that's what I was more interested in.
Right. Okay, and that was toward the end, right?
Yeah, so that was really only that would have been spring 19 to 20 would have been when I switched.
Yeah. And then we see this nice bump up fall of 2021 and all that. So you kind of there's a definite difference between the end and what we see in the middle. So what do you attribute this much better performance the last several semesters?
I feel like I had a reason why what drove me, because I said I wanted to do something medical related in the middle and stuff, but I didn't really know what. And then when COVID came, it was kind of my epiphany of, I want to be a doctor. Like, this is what I feel like I'm supposed to do. Yeah. And so with that, I had mostly the willpower and the determination to, put in those extra hours at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning studying and doing stuff like that.
So did you just graduate last fall?
No, so I will graduate this semester.
This semester. Okay, so you're finishing
Yeah.
up now. Okay,
Yep.
good, 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 good.
So
And your degree will be in what?
it,
Biology or
yeah,
yeah.
it'll be
Uh-huh.
biology with a couple minors, but
Right. Probably a psychology minor, right?
yeah, psychology, chem, usually
Yeah.
the basic
Yeah.
pre-med ones.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, nice. Good. Okay, good. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You kind of figured things out, and it's amazing how when we figure out when we get things a little bit figured out, we sometimes really improve because we're like, "Holy cow! Now I know, and now I'm really, engaged in what I'm doing." And it seems to be the case for you, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Let's go down to MCAT and look at that. So we have two. It looks like we have a diagnostic, a blueprint diagnostic, and a blueprint full length. And your target date is May 19th. And so are you doing the blueprint program, or what are you doing to study for the MCAT?
Yeah, pretty much using the blueprint and just did their online program, and
Mm-hmm.
then added some other stuff like some Anki flashcards and
Right.
some other supplemental stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
mostly blueprint.
And how do you think that your study process is going?
I feel like it's going really good. I mean, a lot of my original classes that it's reviewing are things that I took 2 or 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's kind of like all of biology and chemistry makes sense and why you have to take all these classes. So
Right.
it's going good, and I still have quite a couple months left to review, and so I'm pretty optimistic that I can do better than I've done so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, so I think a diagnostic exam that you took in November at a 496, that's not bad for a diagnostic score. That's actually pretty decent for a baseline, and I think you took the just I guess last week or in the last couple of weeks the latest full length that you had with a 504, which is nice. What would you say if you had to set a goal score? What are you shooting for?
Um, I mean, I think realistically, my goal would be like around 515, over
Hmm.
510.
Okay.
I think anything above that is kind of you either can do it or you can't. But I feel like a
Right.
510 is something I could study for, and that
Hmm.
it would make up for my like my grades and kind of that area.
Sure. Sure. Good. Okay. That sounds good. So keep up the good work with the MCAT. I think that's going to be really important, as it is for everybody. But I think keeping that keeping your focus on the MCAT is great. So let's look at your activities, and I'm going to put us back to going back. So what we have here is a lot of stuff. Now you are and have been for a while a baseball player, right?
Yep, I have. I've stopped playing, yeah, last December. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just got too much stuff going on, and a wife and a
Right. And
pregnant
this
wife
is
really changes that.
that. Yeah, I'm sure. And this is varsity sports, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Uh-huh. Okay. And so I think admissions committees typically understand that varsity athletes have quite a difficult schedule, and sometimes that makes it really tough on them. And so what I would say is, there will be some recognition by admissions committees that as a varsity athlete, you were. Under those time constraints, and that could have, definitely impacted things a little bit. Now you've got a lot of stuff on here. I was looking earlier at this. You've done some coaching. Is it as a volunteer for? Is this your high school that you graduated from?
No, it was the local So I helped coach the local high school for like COVID summer.
Uh-huh.
And then I also
Uh-huh.
helped coach my college team as a pitching coach.
Gotcha.
So
Are you a
there
pitcher?
should be, yeah, I was, yep,
Oh yeah,
left-handed.
nice.
So
Nice.
that's why when you're
Oh
left-handed,
wow. So you were sought after, I bet.
yeah, they stick you on the mound or they stick you in the outfield or first base. So you don't have many options.
Right, right. Okay, good. And so we see a lot of other things here. You were an RA at school, which I definitely would categorize as a leadership type thing. The GNC assistant store manager, I think, you could categorize that also as leadership. That definitely a leadership type position. And
Okay.
I'm sure you learned a lot about working with people and working under duress when customers were unhappy with whatever, stuff like
especially
that.
especially when you're in a nutrition store.
Right. And then we get down here to paid employment, medical or dental. So you were a COVID tester. This would have been, I guess, so for quite a while. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was just I really liked it. Honestly, it was pretty eye-opening to see like how people reacted to having the ability to be tested. So, because a lot of it, I mean, a rural community, we didn't have all the resources that say like Salt Lake or a big city would have. And so, yeah, we just, take phone calls. People would drive up. A lot of it was emergency responders and stuff in the beginning. And we just worked our way from there. And I know definitely learned a lot about how people react to situations especially when you have to tell someone they're positive for COVID and,
Yeah.
they've been quarantined for a week or two and then they're positive again. And they're trying to figure out where next meal's going to come from because they haven't worked. So,
Yeah. That's tough. Yeah.
but learned a
Good.
lot from that.
And then on the next page, we see some community service stuff related to baseball as a coach. Tell me a little bit about the Rural Health Scholars recruitment thing that you volunteered. What was that all about?
Yeah. So, kind of when I made the switch that I was going to do biology and wanted to go to med school, we had a program. It's like Rural Health Scholars. And the whole point is to get people that live in rural communities the ability and the resources to pretty much achieve their dreams of working in the healthcare field. And so we partner with a couple different universities around here, like Dixie and St. George, some more of these smaller colleges and that are like in rural areas or have been before. And we just pretty much give resources to the students, and like we organize peer mentoring programs. We have test prep help. And yeah, I really liked it because I feel like I didn't have any help because of where I was at like a rural community.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to give back to all the students that are in my same boat that didn't know these things you had to do in their first 2 years of school. And if I would have done that, I probably would be in med school right now if I would have known these things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean that's often the case with rural school districts and first generation college students. A variety of kinds of people who they just don't know. There hasn't been a whole lot of assistance for them, and so they're kind of going into it, figuring it out for themselves. And was that kind of your experience?
Yeah, for me, my dad was a pharmacist, but med school and pharmacy is still very different. And when he went to school, it was a long time ago. You didn't need a doctorate or a master's or whatever to practice pharmacy then and stuff.
Right.
So,
right.
But yeah, that's kind of how I felt. They're the resources are there, just you don't know how to access them or how to find them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to talk a little bit about the athletic training assistant. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so through playing baseball and just being an athlete on campus, I got really close with our athletic trainer. And so this past year, I would just kind of go in and help where was needed. A lot of it was taping ankles and stuff. But like learned a lot of kind of those rehab or like sports specific things, like how to scrape out muscles, massaging, cupping, and just kind of how to take care of athletes and stuff. It's been really fun. I've seen some pretty gnarly injuries and stuff, and it's been great to see the people that, like have torn their ACL or something, be able to rehab and get back to where they're at and kind of follow their rehab process.
Yeah, sure. Now, I wanted to point this out because you have this categorized, at least in MAPT, as community service, volunteer, medical or clinical. And tell me a little bit about why you chose that category for that activity.
Pretty much just like what the category says. Like I was thinking of it as volunteering for my community, and I classified it as like medical or clinical because I would classify them as patients. I mean, not like a doctor's office, but I'd still say it's a patient.
Yeah. So, and the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I really wanted to point out that on the application on AMCAS, you have to choose what category you think something fits in, and that is a decision that you as the applicant makes, and that you so in this particular situation, you categorized the athletic training stuff that you did as essentially as a clinical volunteer type activity, and I students often wonder about that, about how do I select, which category this goes in, and is it clinical or not clinical, and can I, indicate. That is something that you have to be prepared to do, and you have to indicate what you think it was. The medical schools that you're applying to can disagree or not disagree. And this is something that I think this would be something that might come up, for example, in an interview. If I was interviewing you, Spencer, I might say, for example, Spencer, you categorized your athletic training role there at your school as medical or clinical. Tell me a little bit more about how you saw that and kind of what you learned through that experience. And so this would give you an opportunity to kind of explain, et cetera, something to that effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I never thought of that before. I thought it was once he classified it was kind of move on, but good to know that people ask about stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it could come up in an interview. It may not, but it could come up in an interview where they may want to know. As an interviewer in the past, that's something that I may well have wanted to ask. Tell me a little bit more about how you saw this as clinical and your experiences with it, and that would give you an opportunity to make your case for this is why I saw this as kind of a clinical activity. So, I mean, it's out of the sort of what I would call the norm.
Right.
It's not in a hospital, it's not in a clinic or whatever, but it's clearly individuals who already have injuries or who you're trying to prevent from having injuries by the methods of taping up their ankle or whatever, that sort of thing. So the other thing I see on here is you've got some physician shadowing. There's another paid employment that I'm interested in, the substance abuse and disorder internship that you did. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of working on that right now. So it's a grant funded program. And pretty much, you probably don't know, I don't know if you know this or not, but Carbon County, where Price is they lead the state of Utah for opioid and substance use disorder.
Oh, wow.
And I'm pretty sure they're nationally ranked of like the most use per capita. And so pretty much in this job, we run a coalition and just a bunch of people from the community who we're trying to work to reduce the amount of use of these substances in our community. So we we're tracking research of the different rehab centers we have, and we do a lot of publications too, and like public health announcements or whatever. I don't know how to call them, but ads. Ads is the best way to explain it.
Right.
and stuff. So yeah, it's really eye-opening because you don't think about how many people are dependent on substances. And I always, you always think of substances as opioids, but that was one of the first things I learned on the job is we don't call it opioid addiction, we call it substance use disorder.
Yeah, there you go.
They really all are all connected together and stuff. And yeah, I look forward to, I have like this semester to work on it. And so we're going to do some research papers and some peer reviewed journals, things.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds really great. Great. Yeah, I can't remember. So you did some shadowing and stuff, and I don't think there was anything else that I sort of was wondering about. A lot of it's all pretty clear, kind of what you've been participating in over the course of the last several years or whatever. So let me give you sort of my feeling about what I see here is that there are a couple of different things that give me pause. And these are not going to be probably, at least one of them, not big surprises to you. Your college experience is, what I would say is, I'm trying to think of the right word to use. It's been rocky,
That's a good word.
To say the least, right? And I really think that you did an excellent job here toward the end. And now you said you're in school this semester as well, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm doing like a 15 credit semester. So
yeah, and that's going well.
Yeah, so far so good. It's a lot of work with the MCAT study at the same time, but
yeah, sure.
And working, but
yeah, sure.
You do what you have to do.
Yeah, no, you're right. So if you can pull out, a strong GPA this semester, that'll give you 4 semesters of really good, strong work. So, and that looks like to me that's, those are pretty good credit hour semesters. Looks like somewhere around 15 for each of them. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think there might be like 14, 15. But
yeah. So that really is going to be about 60 hours. And there are medical schools that look at your last 60 hours. And if I looked at, the GPA of your first, 3 years of college, it looks radically different than your last year of school, your last couple of years of school, and what you're going to be doing is hoping and that the medical schools are going to really notice that there's been a significant change for you in that regard, and that you are better than a 3.17 guy.
Right.
And that's the contention that you're going to make. I think you've got close to 60 hours with that level of strong work, and I think that's really gonna be important as medical schools look at it. I think that the MCAT is also going to be a pretty important part of the picture for you, as it is for most applicants. And this is not necessarily to suggest that everything is about the numbers, but the numbers are really important.
They are.
And let's just be real. They are important. The medical schools pay attention to the numbers. It's not all they pay attention to, but it is a big thing that they look at. And so I think that the MCAT's going to be important for you. I would say, so your plan is to take the MCAT May 19th.
Right.
So that gives you all of March, all of April, basically half of May. So you're really looking at about 10 weeks. We're about 10 weeks out from your MCAT date. I would say probably within the next, pretty quick, within the next 3 weeks or so, you need to get to the point where you're taking a practice test a week.
Right.
Is
That's
that
about where I'm
sound
at.
okay? Good. Yeah, and the key to the key to the practice test is not just taking it, but is really studying it after you take it. Studying, why did I get this question wrong? What did I not notice in the passage, or what did I calculate wrong in my head, or whatever. But really studying those items in the practice exam that you got wrong, why you got them wrong. But I think there's also a benefit to studying the questions that you got right, to see, did I get it right for the correct reason?
Right.
There are times when we guess, oh, I don't know the
Yep.
answer to this, so I'm just going to guess. Or when we come down to, well, it could be one of these two, and I'm just not quite sure. So I'm going to, take my best shot. And so I think that there's a real benefit also to studying the passage, the questions that you got right, to see, did I get this right because I really knew it, or did I get this right because I guessed correctly? Does that
Right.
make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah.
There's a couple of those where I'm like, oh, I got it right, and then I got it right
Yeah.
for the wrong reason that
Right.
I thought was
Right.
right. And
Exactly.
at that point,
Exactly.
you're like, well, I guess I'm not as smart as I thought I was yet.
Exactly. So, I think that, studying for the exam is really important. The practice test is really important to build up that stamina, both mentally as well as physically, for the real exam in May. But it sounds like you've got a good plan. You've got resources that you're using. So kudos to you on that. That's really beneficial.
Yeah.
Um, the um, uh, the the activities that you've been involved in, I think, are great. I do have a little bit of a concern about the clinical hours that you have. Um, the clinical hours are really two things that you have that you're really depending on in terms of clinical activities: the COVID testing and the athletic training. And these are what I would call items that it could be easy for an admissions committee member to say, well, neither of these, while they might officially be clinical in a broad definition of clinical, they're not in a clinical setting. They're not, in a clinic or in a doctor's office or in a hospital, etc. So, and the only reason I bring that up is because I know how admissions committee members think sometimes, and so I could easily see them saying, "Well, I'm not sure that this guy really has enough contact with patients within the context of a clinical environment." Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. I was kind of wondering about that too, because it's not, I'm not working with a doctor. It's not like
Right.
an EMT or something like that. So,
Right. So, I mean, now, having said that, I don't think it's necessarily something that and particularly what I would suggest that you do, and this is going to be tough because you got a lot going on, and you're a busy guy. But if you could get some clinical hours in a healthcare setting, that would be really good. I would say, look for some opportunities if you know some doctors or whatever, or nurses or anybody that has contact with doctors. Just make an effort over the course of the next few months and see if there's something that you could get involved with that might be in more of a what I would call a traditional, clinical kind of setting. That's not to minimize what you did as a COVID
right.
tester or the athletic training volunteer, but it is to suggest that I want to see I'm just a little concerned about what that's going to look like to an admissions committee member when they're looking at multiple applicants, and they're trying to make determinations about who we're going to interview. Who are we going to make an offer to or whatever. That it would be easier if you had some hours in a more traditional setting. So for whatever that's worth, you kind of think through it a little bit, and definitely, I think it's beneficial for everybody, every applicant, to think, okay, if I apply this year and for whatever reason I don't get in, then what am I going to do this next year? That gap
Yes,
year for you.
that is definitely a question. So that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking,
Then
is kind of coming down to more school, or do I, go work as a
Well,
DNP or something?
yeah, and that's a good question, and I would say that you could go both ways. Schooling, I obviously if you're planning on staying in Price, Utah, it's limited.
Yes, that is very limited.
Yeah, in terms of what you have access to. Now, if there's a chance to, relocate, then everything, opens up considerably, both in terms of clinical stuff as well as in terms of, additional schooling or whatever. But I would say, honestly, and what I wanted to do real quick while we've still got your thing up, I wanted to look at your school list and kind of see what you've got. You got 12 schools indicated here, and they're a mixture of DO and MD. So I like seeing that. Now, Utah has a medical school, correct or no?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah,
University of Utah. Is that
yeah.
the only medical school in Utah?
There's one in St. George. It's an extension of Rocky Vista.
Oh, right. I
And
see that
then,
now.
yeah, then there's a new one. I think they're in their second year. It's called Norda, I think.
Norda, yeah. We actually know the director of admissions at Norda, and definitely would suggest applying there as well. It's a newer school,
Right.
and it is, but I definitely think it's something worth kind of looking at and evaluating what you think. But I like the idea that you're applying to a variety of different schools, MD and DO. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I kind of just
So
picked around family. So
yeah,
it's
that
hard
makes
making
sense.
school. There's not, there's
Yeah,
a lot of research you'd have to go through to find and kind of like tailor your application to. So it's
yeah, yeah. What I think really, when it comes down to it, Spencer, what I would say here is that I think you've got um, a couple of things that are going to work against you a little bit. Obviously, the complicated GPA history that you have.
right.
You knew that already. That's not a big surprise to you. It sounds like you kind of had an inkling about the clinical stuff already. But basically, what I would do if I were you is I think if you can get a solid MCAT score, and you're going to know the MCAT score by mid June, and so plenty early enough to sort of make some decisions. If you can get a solid MCAT score, then I'd apply this year. I'd go for it and just see what happens. But I want you to, in this off year, in this gap year for you, you need to be thinking the whole year. If I don't get in this year, what am I doing this year that's going to make next year better for me? Next
Right.
application year, if that became necessary, and I think that the two areas that I've identified are the areas that you would want to spend the most time with. That would be clinical activities and additional schooling. And if that, so I want you to think about that. What would that look like? And you're going to have to make some tough decisions about relocating, if that's an option, to a place where are more opportunities, both clinically as well as school wise, to pick up. Now there are post-bac programs that you could get involved in around the country. There's a variety of those, and that's something that you'll kind of look at. There are special master's programs. I'm not saying necessarily that you are definitely going to need something like that, but I think
Right.
it's worth you thinking about, and really kind of getting in your mind what and the problem is you can't wait to see what happens with this application cycle to make a determination, and then you got to be ahead of the curve.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of the hard part, is like,
Yeah,
I want to
it's
get ahead of it, but because
yeah,
if not, you're just wasting another year,
yeah, that's exactly right. It's a bit of a dilemma. And so what I would do is I think you need to be thinking now about what and I think you said you're married,
Yeah.
and so you and your wife really need to sit down and kind of talk about it and say, what do we do, and in order to make this happen, what's gonna happen. If you're gonna need to or plan to stay there where you are, then at the very least, I think getting involved in clinical activities within a healthcare setting is going to be good. That is definitely something that you should set as a high priority, to do that. You could take some courses online, which is not a bad thing. But I would want you to do it through some reputable uh, institutions, and I'll give you, there's some examples. Cal Berkeley, for example, has an extension program, and they have science courses that you can take online. Now, not every science course. They don't do every science course, but they do things like genetics or biochemistry, or there's a variety of them. So I would say check out that, even if you had to come down to the point where you're going to stay where you are physically, geographically, then there are some options in terms of online education that you could get involved in, that might be something you would want to look at. But you would want to do it at a strong institution,
Okay.
something that's going to be really considered to be a good, strong institution, and so that means there. So, for example, don't nothing wrong necessarily with University of Phoenix. I'm just using that as an example. This is an institution that's not known for science work.
Right.
It's known for other things, business and some other stuff. So you definitely want to look at institutions that are going to be that have a deep history in the sciences and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the only question with that is, there would be like other upper level science classes I could take at the school down here. Would like to be in person, but like, would I need to be doing I would just enroll as, I don't know how enrollment would work, but it'd be like just taking 15 credits of science classes, or would I need to do a more defined program?
No, not necessarily. I think that if you took classes at your current institution that you haven't had before, that you could do that, definitely, and maybe even mix in an online course, as I described, with that, mix in with that, something to that effect. But yeah, that would be completely acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
for sure. So when coming down to it, Spencer, I definitely think, I think you should apply this year, see what happens, and within the context of understanding this next year, that application year, you're going to be working on some stuff to make your application even better. So if it was necessary for you to reapply, you could, and you could be reapplying as having done some stuff that will really bolster your application in a future year.
okay, thank you. what I was, it's what I came to find out is should I apply or not? So it's a little
Yeah,
different than,
I would say go for it, and again, some of that depends a little bit on the MCAT, but let's just assume that you're going to have a solid MCAT score, and I think the group of schools that you're looking at in terms of applying to, I definitely think that applying both MD and DO is a good idea, and then just kind of see how things play out.
okay. And then what would you say would be a target MCAT score? So like, if
I
you
would
had a number.
say anything above 510
Okay.
would be what I would say is in my characterization of a solid score. If you
Right.
could hit 510 or better, then I would say that would be a good goal to have.
Okay. That's what I was thinking. I just didn't know if there was what you kind of thought was considered a good MCAT score. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think in the 510 or better is really a quite solid score. Obviously, the higher the better, but I think that what you want to do, what you're really trying to do with the MCAT score is corroborate this last couple of years, this last 60 hours or so of college work that you've done where you've done really well, and corroborate that with an MCAT score that says, okay, this guy, now that he's got his now that he kind of knows what he's doing and has gotten it figured out, he's solid. So that's the kind of thing that you want.
okay. Sounds good. So,
Good. Well, thank you for joining us today, Spencer, on Am I Ready? And I hope things go well for you in the future. And keep in touch and let us know how things turn out.